Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing an open Ultra League team that honestly performed better than I expected. I just wanted to try out a triple Shadow team, and if I lost ELO, so be it. So I put together a team of Shadow Gyarados, Shadow Drapion, and Shadow Thunderfang Steelix. And this team did actually go positive for me overall, and I was able to climb up to 2894 ELO, so now I'm getting within striking range of Legend. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and take a look at this triple Shadow team in the Open Ultra League. Hopping into the first match, and we have an amazing lead, Shadow Gyarados into Shadow Golurk. Opponent save switches to Shadow Drapion, and I'm more than happy to stay in here and play out the one shield. The Shadow Gyarados is going to output some pretty nice pressure onto the Drapion. Drapion Crunch is going to be shielded, my Aqua Tail will be shielded as well. Now I'm going to farm up a ton of energy, switching at the last second, getting the catch and sneak onto my own Shadow Drapion. And now I should be in a pretty nice position. I can Poison Sting them into a range where Aqua Tail will KO. And this is the back-to-back Aqua Tails reached by both of us. Aqua Tail connects, but they live on 1 HP. And that is very unfortunate, as I wanted energy to be able to throw at their Golurk. So unfortunately, I'm actually forced to give up the final shield. That's definitely not ideal. In comes the Golurk. I'm going to go for a bait, and I'm going to try and catch them mid-Mud Slap with an Aqua Tail switch in, but my opponent reads me like a book. Great understanding of the situation there, as they send in Licky Licky as I try and snipe with the Aqua Tail. I was a few Dragon Breaths away, so if they had stayed in with the Golurk, I could have landed the Aqua Tail, gotten rid of the Golurk, and made my life very easy. But now, there's going to be a Golurk on the loose in the endgame, and that's going to be a problem. In comes the Thunderfang Steelix. Switch clock will be up for my opponent soon. They're going to land the Shadow Ball, and in comes Golurk. Golurk is 4 away from Dynamic Punch, so we switch into our Drapion and get a game-winning catch. The Dynamic Punch is going to be undercharged to give them a little bit of extra energy, but Shadow Steelix makes it to the Earthquake. Earthquake will inflict massive damage. They survive on 1 HP, but they get Thunderfang down. In comes Licky Licky. Licky Licky is getting outpaced as they need a Shadow Ball to clutch up this game. Psychic Fangs KOs the Licky Licky, and we're able to grab a Game 1 win. Hopping into game number 2, Shadow Gyarados into Gastrodon. The Mud Slapper's out to play today. Opponent is going to save switch into Tentacruel, and I have a good response available with the Steelix. Unfortunately, I was a little too slow on the counter swap there, so I'm unable to make the Psychic Fangs before they're able to get the move. So I decided to go for the cheaper route instead of going for double Psychic Fangs. Instead, I'm just going to full send an Earthquake and pick up the knockout. In comes Gastrodon. Gastrodon is going to get a very healthy farm down. Unfortunately, I can't make it to a second Earthquake, so I'm forced to settle for just a Psychic Fangs and a lot of single resisted Thunderfangs. In comes the Gyarados in the back. My opponent has Drifblim, and unfortunately for my opponent, this is just a completely one game for me at this point. I can just save the shields for Gyarados, and Gyarados will be able to secure the victory. They, of course, will get guaranteed debuffs with Icy Wind, but Astonish just does not do the damage that they needed to in this matchup. I do get a bit of good luck. I do get a Crunch debuff, but regardless, this game was already over. Crunch number 2 is going to land. We don't get a debuff this time, but it's not going to matter. I can just let this go and then sweep with the Shadow Gyarados. In comes Shadow Gyarados getting to the Crunch, and this is going to be good night to that Drifblim. All they have left is the Gastrodon opponent. They're still playing it out. There's no way for them to win this game at this point. One Body Slam does not knock out. They go for a Water Pulse. Does do slightly more damage if I'm not mistaken, but it's still not going to be enough to KO. I'm hoping for the 2-shield flex, so I play to the CMP tie. They survive on 1 HP, and unfortunately, I'm still going to get the win, but I don't get the 2-shield flex out of it, which is a little bit tragic, but I get the farm down, and that's game over. Hopping into the next match, Shadow Gyarados versus Drifblim. Astonish damage in this matchup is a pretty big thing to watch for. As Astonish, look at that, the Shadow Gyarados is just getting absolutely melted. I farm up to a potential Crunch, bait with the Aqua Tail, and I'm able to grab a shield from my opponent. After this, I'm going to look to save switch into the Shadow Drapion. I need to check for any ground types in the back, but it's a simultaneous save swap. I send in Drapion, and they send in Primeape, and that is really not ideal for me. I will go for the Aqua Tail. That's going to land. Aqua Tail number 2, I will lose the CMP tie. The good news for me is a close combat is non-lethal. Shadow Drapion powered up with all those XL candies, able to withstand that damage, and Aqua Tail will pick up a KO. This does mean, unfortunately, that they're going to get farm on either the Thirdmon or the Drifblim. In comes the Drifblim. Drifblim gets a farm down. I send in the Thunderfang Steelix. In the back is Virizion, and that's not what I was hoping to see at all. I will immediately get a debuff applied with Psychic Fangs. I'm going to stay in this matchup looking for a Sacred Sword catch onto the Shadow Gyarados. I am trying whatever I can here to fight back in this game. They're now going to go for the Leaf Blade. I will commit the shield as Leaf Blade would be enough to knock out. And they are debuffed, which means these Dragon Breaths are adding up quite significantly. I go for the Aqua Tail right before they're able to get the move. Aqua Tail will be shielded. In comes the Drifblim. Can I get to the Aqua Tail? The answer is no. And unfortunately, this is just going to be a lost game for me, as the Drifblim will make a Shadow Ball, and I can't even get a farm down. They had energy loaded on the Virizion regardless, so unfortunately, despite the fact that it was an okay lead, the backline was just a very tough backline for me, as Steelix had nowhere to run. Speaking of Steelix, it's on the lead in the next match, a truly terrible lead. I'm going to save switch into Shadow Drapion. If they're going to stay in to go for a Breaking Swipe, I may as well get some damage. I get to fire off the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is going to land, and that, honestly, looks like it should about 3-shot as long as I don't get Breaking Swipe debuffed. And I do get a bit of good luck. They don't get the debuff. They send in a Giratina. How weak can one team be to a Drapion that this is the counter switch? Oh my goodness. Drapion is going to be hit with a Dragon Claw. Unfortunately, I think the Dragon Breaths have done just too much damage, and I barely cannot survive. In comes Shadow Gyarados. Shadow Gyarados, unfortunately, going to have to take a move here. I would love to bank an Aqua Tail and then snipe with the Steelix, and that's exactly what I'm able to do. My opponent now going to bring in their own Steelix. To me, the Earthquake feels too obvious, so I'm going to farm up a ton of energy and go for the Psychic Fangs bait, anticipating that they have to shield this. But they call it! Maybe people just don't run Earthquake, because they do not respect it whatsoever. They already showed Breaking Swipe, and if they're showing Breaking Swipe, they're going to be on Breaking Swipe Psychic Fangs, so I wasn't worried about them having Earthquake. Now I'm just going to full send. That's going to pick up the KO. In the back is Drifblim, and I can just apply way too many debuffs with Psychic Fangs, so the opponent will concede the match. We see another Steel type on the lead in the next match, Shadow Gyarados versus Cobalion. Considering my backline, I'm very happy to see Cobalion on the lead here with Gyarados. I try and throw on good timing, but I accidentally farm up one too many Dragon Breaths and play to the CMP tie. Aqua Tail is going to land. That does some very, very nice damage. They're going to full send the Stone Edge, and now if I land an Aqua Tail, I will be able to Dragon Breath down before they get the Stone Edge. However, I believe I do get a little greedy here, and I try for a Poison Sting down, and unfortunately, that is not possible. The opponent hangs on 1 HP, and they're able to land a Sacred Sword. In comes Feraligatr. Feraligatr now going to be hit with a Crunch. This will not knock out, but it does a lot of damage, and I do get a Crunch debuff. Opponent going to try and play to the CMP tie, but I do not want to let them do that. So instead, I am going to get the free Poison Sting and then return fire with the Crunch. Crunch is going to be shielded. I'm hoping that I can catch here. I try for the catch, but the catch attempt is unsuccessful. Shadow Feraligatr shakes its head as if it's saying, no, you're not getting that catch. And now I bring back in the Drapion, but I miscounted. I thought they were dry, but they had 1 residual. They're going to win the cap tie. KO with the Hydro Cannon. In comes Steelix. Steelix gets the farm down, but I lost my entire Drapion, and unfortunately for me, it's a Giratina in the back. I go for the Psychic Fangs because I know an Earthquake will not knock out just yet. Farming up, they try for a catch, they fail the catch, and now I can reapply that Psychic Fangs, and I think I might actually be okay. I just have to get to an Earthquake. Shadow Sneaks will add up in this matchup. Opponent throws a Dragon Claw there on Ancient Power. Ancient Power, very helpful if you're stuck against something like a Talonflame, but if you're going up against a Steel type, you are completely walled, and that means that despite my horrendous miscount, we're going to be able to take this win, as Earthquake will KO that Giratina. Moving to the next match, Shadow Gyarados versus Alolan Sandslash. This is a core breaker for this particular team, so I'm kind of forced to stay in here and play this out. Sandslash is going to strike first with an Ice Punch. I know I can tank it, but it is going to inflict serious damage. I am the Shadow Gyarados. I do not have much bulk to speak of. I will fire off the Aqua Tail. That's going to do some okay damage, and now in comes Shadow Drapion. Shadow Drapion, I can survive a Drill Run, but I don't really want to take that damage, so I will commit the shield, and I'm looking to farm up massively. I go for the crunch. Opponent makes a nice catch onto Virizion. Opponent running a line that is intentionally very, very ABA weak to fire. Virizion does get crunch debuffed, so I do have a bit of good crunch debuff luck going in these sets. I go for crunch number 2, and I get another debuff. That's a pretty big surprise. They're 2 off their next move, so what I'm going to do is throw a 3 Poison Stings, switch into the Gyarados, and catch the Sacred Sword, as Gyarados will actually be able to survive this. Opponent, their switch clock is just up, and I can't get the move. Oh my goodness, that is very unfortunate. I thought I'd be able to get the farm down and then make an Aqua Tail, but that was a miscalculation on my part. I'm not able to get there, and now that is a bit of a complicating factor. This is only an Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail does not knock out here, and the opponent knows that they let that through, and I have to hope that Steelix will be able to sweep in an endgame where my opponent has a shield and I do not. I send in the Steelix. It's going to be a Dragon Breath Giratina, and I will go for the Psychic Fangs right off the bat. I know that an Earthquake is not going to be enough to knock out. I'm going to need to go for a Psychic Fangs, and I think my win con is that my opponent tries to call the fact that I do not have Earthquake. Of course, I'm going to farm up to it, but my win con is that they no-shield it, assuming that future Psychic Fangs will do more. So here it is, the moment of truth. Do they shield it? Yes, they do. They unfortunately do respect the Earthquake. That's going to be game over, and I will concede the match. Shadow Gyarados versus Talonflame, a great lead. Opponent safe switches into Virizion, and I actually don't have a great response to Virizion on this team. Virizion going to be hit with an Aqua Tail. Everything I throw here is going to be resisted. They will commit a shield, but I'm going to get a switch out and a catch of what should be a Leaf Blade onto the Shadow Drapion, and it is. Being able to catch a Leaf Blade onto Drapion makes this matchup so much more comfortable, and now I can go for the Crunch. Crunch, of course, is resisted, not going to do a ton of damage. I can tank the Sacred Sword here, no problem. Opponent actually not running Sacred Sword. They're on Leaf Blade Stone Edge. In comes Talonflame, and Talonflame will instantly be met with the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is going to land. Can I switch out? No, my clock was just not up. I send in the Shadow Gyarados, and Gyarados is able to outpace in this matchup, and Aqua Tail will be lethal here. My opponent is forced to give up a shield. I'm more than happy to shield back, because I think I can farm down, or if I can't, I can just go for the Aqua Tail. Well, I can definitely farm down if they Brave Bird, so they do go for the Brave Bird. I get a massive farm down, and in the back, it is Zygarde, and oh my goodness, we are well positioned to win this game. Crunch lands, gets a defense drop. In comes Virizion, my opponent, going for the combo play and also looking to reset their defense. The Leaf Blade will be shielded. I get the farm down. Back in comes Zygarde, and I get to another Crunch. I'm hoping that I don't have to reveal the third here. Zygarde tanks the Crunch, and they will narrowly see my third Pokemon. I send in the Shadow Steelix. There's just no way for them to win, and they will concede the match. Shadow Gyarados versus another Sandslash, a problem spot for this team. The unfortunate thing is the normal team that I run is Golurk lead, and Golurk absolutely obliterates Sandslash, so it is a bit unfortunate to see all these Steel types on the lead when I'm not running the Golurk lead. My opponent lands the Ice Punch, I go for the Aqua Tail, and in comes Drapion. Opponent now going to send out a Gastrodon, and this is really not great. My opponent incredibly weak to Virizion. Oh my goodness, if they saw Virizion lead, they would basically just lose. But I don't have Virizion lead, so this is a very difficult spot to be in. I can't make double Aqua Tail, so I'm forced to just go for a Crunch here. But if I had the health to do so, that's what I would have done. Now, they do exit with energy on the Gastrodon, which is unfortunate. I send in the Gyarados, and I will commit the shield. As Gyarados is very good against Gastrodon, but unfortunately, it would have just about knocked out there or put me into farm down range for the Sandslash. I'm able to make the Aqua Tail, I send in the Steelix, and this is a true 50-50. If they Ice Punch bait me, they can get a Drill Run, but they Drill Run, and that means they're only going to get to an Ice Punch here. Ice Punch not going to do a ton of damage, but again, I'm just in a position where, unfortunately, I need to try and 1v2 with a Steelix that's down a shield. And my opponent has their own Steelix in the back, so even if I land the Earthquake, it doesn't KO. I am able to successfully land the Earthquake, but my opponent is farming up to Earthquake energy, which means this is probably going to be game over for me. And there it is, Earthquake KOs, and Gyarados is just too low. Hopping into the final match, good lead, Shadow Gyarados versus Shadow Dragonite. Opponent save switches into Feraligatr. I do have two better responses in the back technically, but I'm very fine staying in and playing this out with the Gyarados. Gyarados, crunch, massive damage, no shielded by Feraligatr. I'm gonna no shield as well because I have an idea. I'm sending in the Shadow Drapion. I get the perfect Poison Sting farm down. Now my Drapion's basically full HP, but I almost have a crunch loaded, which means that this Shadow Dragonite is not going to be able to win the twos here. I will make it to 3 crunches. Let's fire off crunch number 1. Opponent is going to commit the shield. I look to farm up to the back-to-back crunches before throwing, so they will be able to force a shield back, but by me farming up to the back-to-back, that means that my opponent is now unable to commit the shield, or if they do, they're going to have to catch out of it because I have 2 moves. They let it go. In the back is Ampharos, which is pretty good for Steelix, but if they have Focus Blast, things could get difficult. They will commit the shield. I decide to throw the Aqua Tail here. I could have thrown 3 Poison Stings and then switched to preserve an ability to make a crunch later, but I decided I was going to play it in a linear manner. And now this is the moment of truth. Do they have the Focus Blast? I say yes, and I get it right. They do have Focus Blast. And by the time I farm them to an Earthquake, they're already Thunderfanged into Psychic Fang's range, so I can just go for the Psychic Fangs here, and that will be able to pick up the KO. And right at the end, this is me claiming my final set of the day, showing that I did make it to 2894 ELO. All in all, this team, I did not expect to perform as well as it did. I was expecting to lose ELO, but just have a good time doing it. So the fact that I was able to go positive was a bit of a surprise. I think what really helped it was the fact that this upper boards Ultra League meta is very, very reliant on Zygarde and very reliant on Gastrodon. And those are 2 Pokemon that Shadow Gyarados can do pretty well into. So I think Gyarados ended up being a decent option. Honestly, I felt like the star of the show a little bit was the Thunderfang Steelix. Steelix put in an insane amount of work for me today. So I'd be curious to revisit the line in the future, potentially with a different lead. I would have to do some research because it would definitely have to be something that destroys Mudslap, because Steelix can't do anything against Mudslappers whatsoever. But overall, honestly, today was just a good day. I am very happy when I can run triple Shadows and go positive, and in this instance, run a Pokemon that's as fun as Shadow Gyarados. I don't think this is a team that I would necessarily recommend for climbing. It was more so just a team that worked really well in the particular ELO range that I was in and for the meta that I was seeing, but it was a very fun team to run. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy content like this, consider supporting the channel. Ways you can do that include liking the video, subscribing to the channel if you haven't, and as well becoming a channel member. A big thank you to the wonderful channel members we have here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.